Hi everybody, this is FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos, and it's time for another Viewer Games and Questions show. So we'll start with the game submitted by Blobby12, who's playing black, so we'll flip the board around here. And he had a few questions about the game, but basically the game is more or less straightforward after the opening. So okay, we start with the Scotch, and here after e5, he played knight to d5 and asked a slightly funny question, which is knight to e4 better? And the reason why it's a slightly funny question is that black's overwhelmingly most commonly chosen move here is queen to e7 by a long way. But knight to e4, knight to d5 actually are a little bit interesting. So let's talk about this position a little bit. White has, of course, a little bit more space at the moment and a better structure. So these are the two advantages that white has. What black has potentially is play against the e5 pawn, so this pawn might be a bit overextended. And there's also a slight lead in development, and that can be increased with queen to e7. So this is the idea. I mean, it looks goofy because you're blocking in this bishop here on f8, so this guy has to suffer a little bit. But the only good move for white here in turn is queen to e2. So white's got the exact same problem that black does. His own bishop on f1 is stuck. So now knight to d5 happens. c4 is the main move by, again, a big margin. And here black can play either knight to b6, which is an important line, but it's slightly less popular than bishop to a6. And after this, white generally plays b3, not necessarily right away, but fairly soon. I mean, knight to d2, b3, and g3 are the main moves. White can also play queen to e4, kind of trolling for a draw, hoping for knight f6, queen e2, knight d5, and so on. But I believe black can vary and avoid that with knight to b6. Anyway, this isn't even the beginning of the main line. We're just sort of getting to it, and there's just tons and tons of theory. So that's a research project for you to work on. Look at a site like chessgames.com, or if you've got Fritz or some other database program, just flip through your database and you'll see lots and lots of games in that variation. But let's discuss knight to d5 and knight to e4 a little bit. All right, knight to d5 is the game move, so we'll come back to that. And for now, let's talk about knight to e4. And this isn't such a bad move. The knight, of course, is probably not going to stay there. I mean, if white attacks it with a piece and black plays d5, then you got to worry about taking, and then white trading queens on d8, and black will have an even worse structure. But the knight can go back to c5, or g5 sometimes, and then to e6. So it's not really out on a limb out there. All right, so white has tried several moves here. The two most popular choices are queen f3 and knight to d2. So on knight to d2, black could trade, and then I think I slightly prefer to have white in either case, but it's playable for black to be sure, and you're avoiding lots of theory. On the other hand, I'm not sure how many problems white has to solve here, so I think white just has a small edge, but it's an easy position to play, so that's the drawback of playing this way. Black can also try knight to c5. Against that, I think white should play knight to f3, putting the knight on a good square and clearing the way for the bishop on c1 to develop wherever, e3, f4, g5. Okay, so knight to d2 is a reasonable continuation, and queen f3 I think is the most popular line. Let me check real fast. Yeah, queen f3 is played more, although knight to d2 has scored better. Bishop to d3 scored better still, but it's a rarer move, and I don't really think it's better. I think it's more just a function of the few games. Anyway, queen f3, the main move. Now knight to g5. And here there's a game, recently played game actually, with a very strong grandmaster. I think it was maybe Mechia, the strong Polish GM, although, well, he was already a GM, although not quite as strong as he is now, but he played queen to h5. Knight e6, bishop d3, g6, queen e2, bishop g7, f4. And I don't remember what his opponent played. I think he castled, but it looks as if d6, just immediately trying to declare war on the white pawn center, might even be a bit better for black. So I mentioned that white can be overextended sometimes, and that black has lead in development. Well, that seems to be the case here as well, and I would prefer black. So after queen f3, knight g5, probably the best move is queen at g3. Knight to e6, bishop to d3, and the position is roughly equal, maybe a touch better for white. The thing is, though, with this sideline, black still hasn't really resolved the difficulties of his position. So white still has a little bit more space, and black still has his slightly vulnerable queenside structure. It's not a big deal. I mean, if you hate this kind of structure with black, you should not play 1e5, because there are quite a few variations, quite a few openings where white can more or less force black to have that. But it's an okay position for black. So I don't think this really should supplant queen to e7, but you are certainly avoiding a lot of theory by doing so. Okay, so the game move was knight to d5. And here I think white should play c4. Just kick this away, just as white does in the line queen e2, queen e7, queen e2, knight d5, c4. So I think it's right here, and it's right in the similar position in the game. Sorry, after knight to d5, c4. Okay, so black could play bishop to b4 check here, trade. Again, white has a little edge. Or knight to b6, bishop to d3, d5, or d6, and then e takes d6. And I think after either capture, again, white's got a little edge. Bishop takes d6 might actually be the best move here. Castles, castles. And now, if white tries to be tactically alert here, or let's say, well, it's tactically alert, but is too optimistic about his tactically alert idea, and he plays queen to c2, then I think this lets black equalize. So this looks really good. You're threatening c5, and you're threatening to grab the pawn on h7. But black has an adequate response. Maybe more than one, but you might want to try to see if you can figure out what it is that black should do here. The simplest answer, I think, is queen h4. So we threaten mate, and after g3, queen h5, the queen is covering both h7 and c5, and black is fine. So instead of queen to c2, white should play something routine like knight to c3, and again has a very small edge, thanks naturally to the slightly weakened black queenside structure. I do want to say that this pawn structure is not as bad as it looks either. So after suggesting that it's a slight problem, I want to make sure we don't go too far and get panicky about it. In fact, these pawns are quite difficult to get at. So c7 and a7 are quite safe and will be safe for a long, long time. And even the pawn on c6 is not really in too much danger. The only piece that white can attack it with is, let's say, attack it with either the bishop or the queen, but black could just play c5, and that's not the only expedient perhaps available to him, but certainly that will take care of the problem for a while. The only problem with playing c5 is you're slightly constricting your dark squared bishop, but it's certainly a playable position for black in any case. All right, black could also play c takes d6 to undouble the pawns, but actually I think this increases white's edge slightly after castles, because while you're fixing the pawns, black's position loses a lot of its dynamism. So this dark squared bishop that was really good on d6 is not going to be as good on e7, and the c6 pawn is still slightly vulnerable, and if it goes to c5, then I think the d6 pawn becomes a bigger problem than clearly the c7 pawn would be. So here, if black at some point plays c5, well, it's not so bad. But here, c5 and the d6 pawn is backward on an open file. All right, so anyway, all this goes to say that I would prefer c4 here for white. After bishop to d3, I think black is equal. After d6, and if queen e2, queen e7, I think is okay. While the move played in the game, g6, I think is also pretty much fine. I don't think there's any big problem with this. Yeah, I mean, white's bishop could get to g5, perhaps, and but that would take quite a bit of time, and I think black would be all right in the meantime. And the bishop on the long diagonal is going to be very effective, so I think black is still equal here. So the game continued with castling, bishop g7, And here again, I think c4 is the way to go. The knight's good on d5. I mean, there's no reason to just let it sit on this very attractive perch. So white played instead f4, which is an optimistic move. If he was a bit further along in his development, then I think this would be an entirely legitimate way to go. But there is the danger that black will simply finish his development, open the center, and white will find himself with problems, especially on the a7 g1 diagonal. Okay, so black castled, and sure enough plays d6. And here I think black is better. Bishop to d2 is also, I think, a rather inapt move for white on the previous turn. The bishop doesn't do very much here. Okay, it prepares knight to c3, but you know, it is weakening the long diagonal. So white tried to neutralize that with c4 followed by bishop to c3. But if black had played knight to b6, I'm not sure that white's plan would be a complete success. So this puts some more pressure on the queen side. In the game, after knight to e7, bishop to c3 is probably equal, although I think white still has to be a bit more careful. Rook to e8, and here white should have played queen f3. This would have been a nice way of neutralizing the pressure against e5, because whenever black takes on e5, well, we recapture probably with the bishop first, and on, let's say, takes and pawn takes, there's play against f7. So this, I think, would have kept the balance for white. So instead, knight to d2, takes, and again, white needs to play actively here, and I think queen f3 is the way to do it. So it protects the bishop on d3, and it's fighting for some activity, for some attacking prospects over on the king side. So if ef, queen f4, of course black can't take on d3 because queen f7 check, and then either queen or bishop takes g7 as mate. So bishop f5, takes, and now knight e4, and white is remaining pretty active. So you know, I'd like to put maybe the rook on d1, maybe play g4. It's pressure against f7, pressure against f6. So white's got some chances here still has some compensation for the pawn. After bishop to c2, it's really slow, and now it's getting worse. I mean, the threat's knight to e3. So here, I think white really needed to take the knight, and again, just take, maybe play knight f3, with, again, reasonable chances to hold. I mean, black is up a fairly clean pawn, but white's solid, white has no weaknesses, black's queen side is slightly weak. It's not that, again, it's not that those pawns are going to drop, but the need to defend them may force black to play a little bit more passively than he would like to. I mean, he'll have the burden of trying to keep the queen side safe and make progress over on the king side. And doing both of those tasks might prove kind of tough. In the game, though, white played knight to f3, and now it's very easy for black, and black finished pretty effectively. So knight e3, takes, so we're still hitting the rook and the bishop, so rook f2 is forced. Here maybe e takes f4 is an improvement, because the knight on e3 is really great. I mean, there's no rush to take for that bishop on c2. Plus we're attacking the pawn on c4, so this would have been an improvement. And black is just up 2 pawns more or less for free, for nothing. So knight c2, rook c2, takes here, c5. Well, okay, I mean, white's still obviously in big trouble here, but maybe not as bad as it would have been. But it quickly returns to being clearly lost. And now black plays a good move, a5. And again, at this point, I think, again, it's clearly winning for black. Now, here I think black makes a small mistake. He plays h5. And I don't really get this move. The thing is, I mean, I want to protect my f4 pawn. So either I'm going to go active and just play a4 or get on with that, or I should play something like h6, maybe f6, something to prepare g5, so I can maintain this structure. h5, I mean, I'm immobilizing my own structure if I'm black by doing that. So I'm making it harder to advance my pawn. So this, and again, I'm putting another pawn on a light square too, which, all right, it's the h pawn. It's not really getting in the bishop's way, but generally speaking, you want to have the pawns on dark squares, so that way they complement the bishop. That way, you know, they take care of one color complex, while the bishop does the opposite color complex. So h5 is an inaccuracy. All right, rook f2 and a4. Okay, so this is good. Getting back to his own play. White's a bit cooperative, but he's in trouble anyway. Now here, rook d to a8 was played. It's fine, but maybe f3 is even better, right? Why give him the pawn in a good way? Let's give it to him in a bad way, so he messes up his structure. We're also threatening this guy. So this would have been a small improvement, but at this point it doesn't matter. As long as black doesn't do something really terrible, he should eventually win this. And white was cooperative. So, well, actually he had no choice. He had to trade off one pair of rooks. All right, and here, okay, if I'm white, I don't want to trade material unless I absolutely have to. So I'd probably play g3. So knight takes d5 is a small concession. And then here, of course, rook to d7 is the thing to play. So, you know, it's still a win. I mean, black just plays rook h4, rook d5, and the two extra pawns are going to win sooner or later. But that's what you got to try if you're white. Instead, rook takes c4. I mean, it's you know, you might as well resign if you're going to do that, because the king and pawn ending, there aren't any chances to swindle. I mean, there's no counterplay, there's no anything. So never. I mean, the rule of thumb. I mean, if you're down material, trade pieces, not pawns. I'm sorry, the opposite way. If you're down material, you trade pawns, not pieces. And especially if you're down 2 pawns, I mean, trading pieces is catastrophic most of the time. And going to a king and pawn ending is the worst possible thing you can do. So, of course, black is winning easily, and white resigned here. Okay, so that was that game. Let's take a look at this next one between Rags to Rooks, Raghav Ramesh, and Adrian Elwin. And so white was very happy about this game. He wrote that this was his highest rated scalp, a 182 BCF player. I don't remember exactly how strong that is, but it's pretty decent. Okay, so we'll look at the game now and refer to his comments a bit at a time. Okay, so he played c4, and he notes that he was an English newbie. So the game went e5, knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, knight c6, g3, and black played the reverse Sicilian line with d5. Bishop to b4, bishop to c5 are two other main moves. d5, takes, bishop g2, knight c3. And he writes that he was caught off guard when black played this. He says he definitely didn't want to play d takes c3, and he felt that after b c3, e4, that knight to g1 would be too passive. So here he played knight to d4. So he evaluated this and felt that he had enough compensation for the pawn, and felt that he'd either win it back or that black would overextend trying to keep it. And I think he's right that he does get sufficient compensation for the pawn with knight to d4. But before we proceed with the game, I want to point out that d takes c3 here is not terrible. B takes c3 I think is definitely the right move. But I want to show a couple of lines where dc is actually quite good. So c4, knight f6, knight c3, d5, takes, e4 is kind of pseudo-Grunfeld. And here, while white can certainly play b takes c3, dc3 is not bad either. And this ending is can be a little bit tricky for black. I mean, it's been figured out, but white has had some good results here in the past. And then there's a similar but even better version for white in the symmetrical English. So c5, and here d5. Okay, takes, e4, knight c3, and here d takes c3 absolutely is the right move, better than b takes c3. And the problem is that the pawn on c5, black's pawn on c5, makes it a little bit tough for him to develop his minor pieces as he'd like to. So, okay, white's forced to give up casting privileges, but that's no big deal. The king's going to come here. And one question we can ask, and this is an important question, is, well, what exactly is this dark squared bishop going to do? If he plays e6, well, here's why this pawn on c5 is not so great for him. It blocks the bishop from going to c5, so the bishop's kind of constricted over in that area. All right, if he plays for the fianchetto instead, get rid of that. Well, then he's biting on this pawn on c3, so the bishop ends up not really working very well. White's bishops, on the other hand, both look fantastic. So this guy will be well placed on e3 or f4, and this guy can come to c4, sometimes to b5, and everything is very smooth. Also note that if black were to play e5, I mean, you know, prepare it with f6 and then play e5, then there's this serious hole on d5. So this position is actually pretty annoying for black. White's not winning or anything, but black certainly has an unpleasant defensive task ahead of him. All right, so let's get back to the game. So takes, takes, and here he felt that knight to g1 was too passive, but in fact I think this is not really the case. I mean, yeah, the knight's going backward, but on the other hand, the pawn on e4 is overextended. So just as he said about knight to d4, that he felt that he'd either regain the pawn or that black would overextend trying to keep it, well, it's that same pawn on e4. So I mean, if you play knight to g1, that pawn is still going to be a problem. And hey, if we can get the pawn for nothing, that's better than just getting our pawn back. So for instance, if f5, knight h3, and the knight is actually going to be perfectly good. So yeah, it had to go backward, but it's not really the case that black has gained time. I mean, he's pushed a couple of pawns, and it might even be weakening, having played e4 and f5. The knight's ready to come to f4 in many cases, and we'll have cracks at the pawn here with d3. And if black were to play something like g5 to stop knight to f4, well, now we can play d4, maybe d3, but d4 is probably even better, maybe followed by f3 if necessary, and you can see that white's development is actually quite good here, and black has just too much air on the king side with these overextended pawns. White stands better. Alright, knight to d4. This is not bad. Takes, takes, queen d4, rook b1, and certainly white has good compensation. The e4 pawn is a weakness. White has a little lead in development. The bishop's going to come to b2. The queen comes to c2, where it hits e4 and c7. So white is certainly in good shape. Bishop c5. In fact, by the way, this position is known to theory, so it has occurred in quite a few games. Now, white, in our game, white castled, but that's not really the most accurate move, I think. I think it's better just to play e3, just to seize the initiative. I mean, castling is fine, but we have better things we can do with our time. So white has a lot of active pieces and would like to get the bishop on c1 and the queen into play as well. So let's play e3. We can castle later. For instance, queen c4, bishop to b2. Okay, castles, rook c1, queen to b5, and here white has quite a few pretty decent moves to choose from. Can't castle, that's true, but it's not really a need at the moment. So the good possibilities for white include bishop takes e4, since queen b2, rook c5 is there. White can also play queen to b3, and that'll regain the pawn as well, since after queen b3, ab3, the bishop's hanging, the pawn on c7 might be hanging in some cases, and the bishop on e4 hangs too. Bishop to a1, just a quiet move. This can also be entirely good. And even queen to c2 is fine, protecting the bishop, hitting the bishop on c5, and further attacking the pawn on e4. Alright, in the game, white castled, which is not awful. I just think it's not quite as incisive. Black castled, and now, usually, white has played bishop to b2 here. If queen to d5, then d3, queen a2, and here bishop takes e4 is certainly perfectly good and normal. Other possibilities are queen to c1 and queen to c2. Okay, so queen to c1, the advantage of this is that there's also the possibility of queen to g5, which would be a double attack, hitting the bishop on c5 and threatening mate. Although, since we're already threatening the bishop on c5, that point's kind of irrelevant, since black will have to take care of that at this point. Alright, there might even be, depending on who you're playing, I mean, if you're playing way up, let's say black played something like bishop to b6, you could play bishop g7 here, and pretty much force perpetual check, queen g5, queen f6, and so on. Alright, in the game, white played queen to c2. Black should probably play rook to e8 here, or at least it's a reasonable alternative, but he played f5. And now maybe white should play d3, giving up the pawn. But after e takes d3, e takes d3, white's initiative continues. So bishop to e3 is threatening to win the piece, and of course we still have pressure against b7. Let's say bishop to b6 to neutralize the first two problems, but bishop to b2, and white is very active. His bishops are both great, so I like white. I think white's even a little bit better here. Alright, bishop to b2 was played, queen to d6, and we're actually still following earlier games, and here I think d3, which I don't think was played in the earlier game. Let me see if I have that offhand. Yeah, I don't remember what was played. It wasn't d3 though, and it wasn't queen c3. But d3, I think, again, this idea, should be good for some edge for white. All right, so queen c3 I don't really like, though, because rook f7 is in fact very useful for black. Not only does it stop the mate, but it closes the diagonal, so there won't be any little checks that white might use to achieve something else. And it's protecting the pawn on c7, too, so this at least helps black a little bit. Again, I think d3 is best to pry open, or prees open the long diagonal. But rook f to d1, preparing it is okay, too, I suppose. Bishop e6, d3, and now e3 was a good move. f4 I think is right. And here black should have played c6, and now I think black is better. I think black stands slightly better at this point. It's important, excuse me, it's important to neutralize the bishop on g2. And notice also that the rook on f7, now its defensive range of influence extends all the way to the b7 pawn. So black has everything covered. He's kept his extra pawn, and while the long diagonal is still certainly something that black has to be careful about, it's becoming his only problem, and perhaps he can neutralize it in the near future with something like rook to d8 and then bishop to d4. So I think black is kind of consolidating his extra pawn at this point. Instead, though, black played bishop takes a2, and now it becomes messy, and I think white is completely back in the game after bishop takes b7. So now the light squared bishop, white's light squared bishop, is again functioning very nicely. Black's queenside pawn structure is a mess, and black very thoughtfully eliminated white's only weakness at the cost of making two weaknesses in his own position. So bishop takes a2 is really bad. All right, rook a8, rook e8, rook a1. The position is still roughly balanced, though. I mean, white has good compensation for the pawn, but probably not more than that. But then black played bishop to d5, which was just an outright blunder. Takes, rook a5, and white just wins a piece. Game over. So black found a neat little trick, played queen to f3, and a move like that can be scary, especially if you don't see it coming. But white reacted just fine. Rook f1, good move. Queen e2, rook c5, and black tried to kick around a bit longer, but there was just nothing to do. Rook e5 is a good move. Taking control of the e-file. Rook e5, queen e5, queen e2, bishop a3, threatening mate with queen e8 check, g5, bishop to b2, threatening mate in 1 now on h8, fg5, f4, and here probably the best move, or the most accurate move, is queen to c5 check. And the point is that on king to g8, then we play queen to d4, renewing the threat of mate on h8, and now king to f8 doesn't work because of queen to d8 mate. But rook f4 is good enough. So black gets to have a moment of fun here with the check and then e2. But after bishop to a3, it's forcing mate. King g8, queen e8 check, and it's mating at most two moves, so black resigned. King g7, queen takes f7, and then queen f8 is checkmate. So nice game by white. But again, I think the d3 idea earlier would have been better, and maybe e3 instead of castling comes into consideration. As for the pawn sack, again, I think knight to g1 is fine, but knight to d4 certainly isn't bad. All right, let's take a look at the next game. This was played by Chris Falter. It was flat man with black against Aroha in a fixed game, a standard game. And yeah, the opening was not overwhelmingly interesting, which is what he says, but it was a kind of a neat ending. He analyzed the game in a lot of detail elsewhere on the Chess Videos site. So, in a way, it's I don't have too much to add to what he said. I mean, I looked at it on my own and checked his analysis very briefly later. But I have a couple of comments that I think are perhaps will perhaps contribute to what he thought of. All right, so he's black and he played the Tarash, and white played a little sideline against it. Okay, bishop to e2, and he played d takes c4, which is fine. I'm not sure that I like it so much. I'd rather have the isolated pawn than give it to white. But okay, it worked out great in this game because here white played the really terrible knight takes d4. I mean, white can't avoid an isolated pawn, so all this does is just trade off so many pieces that there's not going to be any attack. So of course white should play e takes d4 here. And then this is just an extremely well-known position. I mean, this can arise via many different openings, and it's just a complicated beginning of a position to look at. But knight d4 is just awful. Not in the sense that it's a blunder. I mean, white is probably equal after e takes d4, maybe a microscopic edge, and is perhaps, just a touch worse after knight takes d4. And objectively speaking, I'm sure that, God versus God, or 32-man table base versus 32-man table base, would be a draw with a pretty big margin of error in either case. But the point is that in this version, white has nothing to play for but the draw. I mean, white has to just suffer for it, while the other version would just give a normal middle game where both sides would have chances. All right, so the question now is, well, what can black do to try to make something of this potentially weak d4 pawn? Because white could play d5 if black doesn't do anything really interesting. So black plays bishop to b4 to prevent that for the moment. Maybe white could play a3 and then consider b4 and d5, or just being patient. But maybe a3 is worth considering. Anyway, white castled. Black played bishop to d7, bishop d2, castles. Okay, maybe rook to c8 could be considered first there. A3. And now I don't really think I agree with Flatman's choice here. So he played bishop takes c3. And I think after this, the advantage, well, I don't think he has an advantage either way probably, but I think the winning chances after this are not so great. So I would prefer either to put one rook or the other on the c file and then wait and see. So for instance, rook a to c8, ab, rook c4, rook a7, rook b4, and although they're opposite colored bishops, I think black can still play for, I don't think black's winning, but he can still play on with some hopes. The b2 pawn is permanently weak. Black will put the bishop on c6, put a rook on d8, and can try. Alternatively, black could play rook f to c8, so we don't allow this exchange of pawns on a7 for the b4 pawn. So now AB rook c4 would just win a pawn for black outright. So I like this better. I think at the very least we're perhaps going to get a free move. Well, no, that's not true, because bishop to d3, I mean, if we play bishop c3, it's like the game. But I would rather keep the bishops on. So if the bishop goes to d3, then there's no threat of d5 anymore, so we can retreat the bishop in peace. Anyway, that's what I would have done. So after bishop c3, I think this is extremely drawish. And yeah, I don't really think there's any big deal here. I think white should draw if he doesn't self-destruct. So black played a6, which is not a bad move. He wants to play bishop to b5, swap off the light square bishops, and try to go for a good knight versus bad bishop ending. I think this is as good a plan as any in the position. So if I were white, I would have played a4 and not allowed it. Additionally, since my extra bishop, if I'm white, is the dark squared bishop, I want to have my pawns on light squares for the most part. I mean, it's all things being equal. I mean, I'm not going to make some really weakening move or make a pawn a target just to put pawns on light squares. But, it's at least something I'm going to keep my eyes open for, because if light square bishops get traded off, I do not want to have all my pawns blocked on dark squares, constricting my own bishop and giving all of the light squares to my opponent. So a4, I think, would be a good move for white here. So instead he played rook a to c1, bishop b5, takes, and now rook c5 is not bad. Here black traded, but he could consider b6. This is also an interesting move. Rook b5, rook c2, and black has full compensation here. The knight on d5 is terrific, and the rook on b5 could as easily end up stuck as active there. So the only thing that the rook can do there that's useful is if white can play a4, a5 at some point. But anyway, black has no troubles at this point. I don't know if he has anything serious either, but this is playable. So the game went rook c5, dc5, rook c8. Here, maybe rook to c1 is better. Not creating further weaknesses, but okay, b4, b6, rook c1, king f8, king f1. And finally we reach this ending. And yeah, this is maybe the place for black to start thinking about how to conduct it. What's the right disposition of his forces, and perhaps e5 here could be played to take away the d4 square from white's king. So this certainly looks quite sensible. and then to follow up with f5. So if you put these guys here and here, and then bring the king to c6, I think white's going to have a tough time holding that. So this looks like a reasonable way to set things up. And maybe there's not even a rush to play f5. You might want to wait and see a little bit. So let's see. So king to e2, maybe king e7, king d3, now maybe f5. Okay, the only thing I'm worried about playing like this is what I'm going to do on bishop to c3. Well, actually no, here, yeah, I don't want to go into the king and pawn ending, I don't think. Well, actually we could calculate that. So this is kind of spur of the moment here. Probably black is going to win this, but I'm not 100% sure. Alright, we can't play h3 because then g3, and we'll never create a passer. So we can just do g6. Yeah, actually we're just going to win this with zugzwang. We don't need to do anything interesting. So let's say g3, h6, f3, h5, and wins. All right, so so bishop c3 certainly can't be played here. So let's stick to the idea though. Bishop to c1. All right, so now if king to d7, bishop to b2. So this is a slight concern, but maybe knight f4 check. Okay. And, well, actually, he has to go to d2. Now we play knight to g6. Let's say king c3, king c6, king b4. And now what? Knight to f4. Okay, so we're threatening knight to d3 check, and that's more than good enough against bishop takes e5. And yeah, this just looks like it wins for black. All right, so I don't say that this is some kind of forced win. I mean, white could play various things in the meantime, but this would be a good plan. So we first restrict the white king. We have to make sure that our center pawns are stable, but as long as we can do that, then I think white's in big trouble. So the c5 pawn, I mean, it's a weakness. It's a chronic weakness. It's not something that we have to just win on the spot. It's more or less always going to be there for us. So we want to make sure that we can restrict white's forces, keep our center pawn safe, and if we can do that, then I think everything will take care of itself. All right, so king e7, king e2, king d7, king d3, king c6, king d4. And now, well, now it's not as easy. If f6, white just plays f4, and we're not evicting him. I'm just curious about something really fast. So again, I keep thinking of new ideas here. I wonder if this is any good or not. I doubt it, but I do want to check. So black's idea is, of course, to play king c4, king b3, king a3, but white just goes over this way, and probably that's going to work out well for white. So probably play g4. All right, play g5. Okay, h3, h6, king e6, king c4, king d6, king b3 here, takes, here, and yeah, now white wins, right? Unless I'm miscounting. Yep. Yeah, so white wins that. Of course, black didn't have to go over and take the pawn. He can just sit on the position, but if he sits on the position, then he's certainly not winning either. Actually, maybe he just gets. Will he just get zugzwanged here? Probably will. Yeah, for instance, king a4, king b6 is winning. So okay, so that's not a good idea. All right, so in the game, black played knight to e7 and bishop to b4, knight f5 check. Okay, yeah, one idea I had was to play knight to g6. So I mean, I want to. The thing is, if black had taken time out in the first place to keep the white king restricted, then his chances would have been a lot better. So here he has to try to find ways of pushing the king back, but of doing it where he doesn't weaken his own pawns, and it becomes really quite a hassle. All right, so the idea with knight to g6 is that black would like to play f5 and then maybe e5 check, and then get back to the kind of thing that I was talking about before. So white may play g4 here. All right, f6, king e4, knight f8, f4, knight d7, king d4, And while black can win a pawn here by zugzwang, so here white's running out of moves, but kind of like in the game, once the c5 pawn disappears, the white's bishop gets quite active, and white can usually hold the rest of his pawns and save the game. So something like this, and I don't think white should lose this. White should not lose this. So in the game, it was knight f5 check, king e4, knight h4, g3, knight g6, f4, knight f8, h4, and this seems to me dubious. Maybe a full-fledged mistake. But the funny thing is that it may not be possible to win even after this. So here black could play h5 straight away, or the game is the same thing, knight d7, king d4, h5. So it's zugzwang, and all of white's pawns are stuck on dark squares. So normally this would be fantastic. Normally this would just be a win for black. But it seems really tough to do it. I'm not even sure if it's there. So we tried king e3. All right, we got to this position. and now, okay, if black could get his knight to f5, he wins. So that much is clear. So if this guy's here, it's a win. Especially, let's say, the pawn on f6, put the knight on f5, and it'll win. I mean, the thing is that the black king will get too active, white's pieces will be too tied down, and good things will happen. But it's not so easy to actually set that up. For instance, let's say knight b6. So we have to ask, how do we get the knight to f5? Well, the most obvious way is to get there through the d6 square. So we're going to maneuver the knight to d6 first. So knight b6, now bishop to f8. So this is annoying because if we play g6, we have to worry about the white king running in. So let's see. First of all, what if knight to c4? Well, now takes, knight takes, and this would be pretty good for black, except that there's g4, and now the h pawn is a really big problem. Maybe black still holds this, but he's certainly not winning. So g6. Okay, now king e5 is impossible immediately because of this fork, but bishop to b4, and now it's threatened again. All right, if knight to d7, well, we're not getting the knight to f5, so we don't make any progress there. So that's just going back. If knight to c4, well, then white has a4. So this is annoying too. Trading off the last queenside pawn makes it easy for white to hold the position. And if you play knight to c8, well, now you can even lose king to e5. So the knight doesn't get to f5 anyway, and the white king breaks in, and that's bad. And then finally, okay, if f6, then bishop to e7, threatening to take, knight to d5, bishop to f8, and white is preventing black from making any progress. So it's kind of annoying. It's pretty hard to get that, to make that plan work. All right, so king to b6 was what happened in the game. White could perhaps just mark time with king to e4. Oh no, actually, yeah, this line might be interesting for black, because knight f6 check, king e5, king c6. And now one idea is to do this. So it might kind of be in a funny way that white has outsmarted himself. f5, knight g4 check, king e4, takes, and now king to d5. And now black has made some progress. I'm not sure if he's winning yet, but it's definitely much better than it was. So bishop to d6 was a pretty decent move. And now black tried something different. So he tries to run around the outside. King a5, king e4, king a4, f5. So white's going for counterplay, trying to trade off all the pawns on the king side. Good idea. f5 takes, and now king to b3. Now here white played king to g5, which certainly isn't bad. I think he can also play g4. So again, the plan of swapping pawns is a pretty good one. Let's say f6, and bishop b7, king c4, king f4, king d5, bishop d8. And while black has managed to avoid too many exchanges on the king side, it's still hard to see how he makes any real progress. If he ever plays f5, then the white king goes to f4 and then to g5, and yeah, it's just tough to see how black goes anywhere. As I said, though, the move chosen in the game was good too. King g5, threatening the pawn. Black played g6, and now here comes the king all the way around the corner. King c4, king g7, king d5, and black intends to play king e6 next. But white played king f7, and this is good enough for a draw as well. Takes, takes, and yeah, it looks like a draw. So white does have to be accurate in some lines, but he holds. All right, for instance, okay, one idea for black is to win this a pawn as fast as possible and run the b pawn up the board, but the simplest version of the plan is not quite fast enough. Knight e5 check, king h4, knight c4, king g6, takes, and both sides queen. White queens first, black queens with check. Either way, even if it wasn't check, it would still be a draw. Although white could at least play queen f8 check and win the knight, but that would still be a draw. All right, so that one doesn't work. Okay, another idea for black is to bring his king to the corner first, and then try to let the knight run free. So here, play could continue king h5, king f7, king g5, knight e5, king f5. Yeah, and this is the key. Knight c4, h6, knight a3, and here the king goes back over towards the queen side. So yeah, if white were to try to just make progress with his kingside pawns and ignore the b pawn, it would be way too slow. But the good news for him is that his king can get back in time, and the knight can't help the pawn all by itself. I mean, it can't both, let's say, protect a pawn and control the next square up. So all the knight can do is kind of maintain the status quo at best on the queen side, while on the king side, the black king can't win both pawns. I mean, let's say black's king ends up on h6, white's pawn is on g4. There's nothing that black can do, because once he plays king g5, if he ever takes, h6. And otherwise the pawns just stay there, and white will mark time with his king over on the other side of the board. So this is a draw. All right, in the game, black played king to e6, king h5, and king f7. Okay, if he tried knight e5, this is also a draw. Again, the key idea for white is to leave the king side alone and bring the king back towards the queen side, and this holds. So in the game, black played king f7, okay, is king h6, knight f6, and here, mistake, and a familiar mistake. Okay, here, white played h5, he should have played king to g5, brought the king back to the queen side, and drawn the game fairly comfortably. So instead, after h5, black had one possibility to win. It requires very accurate play, but it can be done. So knight to e4 is, I think, the only winning move here. g4, king f6, king h7, and now knight f2. So here, black wins one of the pawns, and so that means that his king will be okay on the king side, and we'll see that he's able to save his b pawn too. So g5, and here comes the white king, but black will be able to just hold on. So knight to e4 prevents king c5, and the awkward thing is that, you know, if white could get his king over to b3 or b4, then he could play a4 and swap off the pawn. Or if he could play king d5, king c6, but he's just never quite in time. Well, king d5, king c6 is met by knight c3. But yeah, putting the king on b3 is just not going to happen. That said, he can still make it very annoying for black, very difficult for black. King d3, king f4, king d4, king f5, king d5. So it looks like black is stuck here. The knight can't move, it seems, because then the king gets too close to the pawn, but the king can't move without dropping the knight. What's the solution? Well, we go to this opposite side, so knight to c3 check, and now knight to a4. So again, the knight creates this barrier, king d5, and now king f6, king d6, and now the knight goes to c3. So finally, black is making progress. King c6, king e6, king c5, king e5, and after king to b4, king d4. And he holds the knight, and of course a4 is prevented, and now it's an easy win. So for instance, on king to b3, king to d3, if king b2, then king c4, and then it's all easy. Or if king to b4, king c2, and the black king comes around the backside, wins the a-pawn in the game. All right, in the game though, black played knight to g8 check instead of knight to e4, and now white was off the hook. And finally he realizes, okay, the king belongs on the queen side. Yes, this is what I need to do. And then it's just a draw. And this is simple. If king to b5, you just play knight to d6 check. There's no way for white to make progress, so just gave up the pawn and the game ended. All right, so an interesting night ending, and an interesting, well, the whole ending was fairly interesting. Again, I think the key really was at the very beginning of this night ending that it was very important for Black here to figure out what the proper disposition of his forces and his central pawns would be. All right, last up, actually it's not quite last. We have one more game, and I think there was a question. So this is from Master Killer, and it's just a very strange game that he won with Black against an anonymous player. So it was a King's Gambit, and then here White played the very unusual knight to d4. So the normal moves here are knight to e5, and secondarily knight to g5, but knight e5 is by far and away the right move here. But White played knight to d4, which is kind of funny. I mean, it doesn't threaten anything there, it's just a target. I guess maybe White was hoping in some lines he could put the knight on f5, but it never really happens. Alright, the usual move here I think is d5. Not that there is really much of a usual move, I mean it's very rare, but d5 seems to be played in most of the games, and in the one game featuring a Grandmaster with Black. Okay, Black played h5, bishop c4, d6. Here probably d3 is the better move for White, but he castled. And I mean, this is really asking for trouble. I mean, you know, ideas with queen h4 and g3 are certainly a big problem. So, for instance, bishop to g7 would be probably a good move here, and on c3 then f3, because if g takes f3, queen h4, or maybe even g3, both look really pretty powerful. Okay, in the game, Black played queen h4, White played rook f4, and now bishop to h6 I think would have won. For instance, check here, and the point is, okay, so let's go back to here. We want to play g3, but g3 doesn't win here for two reasons. One, of course, is that it hangs the queen. The second reason is that White has knight to f3 to cover the h2 square. So that's the point of bishop to h6. So first we eliminate the rook from that square. The f7 pawn doesn't matter here. And now we play bishop to g7 to get rid of the knight. Very simple. So c3, takes, g3, and Black should win. Alright, so it's a nice logical idea, and should lead to a win. So instead Black played knight to h6, and now it just becomes a very murky game. White can keep all of his forces where they are. So he played knight to b5. Maybe knight e2 is a little bit sounder, but this is okay. Knight a6, d4, bishop e7, knight 1 to c3. Okay, probably better to leave that square for the other knight, but there is one interesting possibility. After c6, in the game, White played knight to a3, which is not terribly inspiring, but a move that might have been quite interesting was knight takes d6 check. So bishop d6, e5, and then knight to e4. And this knight is going to jump into f6. There might even be some funny variations where Black plays something like rook takes, well, okay, not rook f7 because knight f, well, no, you could. Yeah, rook f7, knight f7, bishop f7, followed by bishop to g5, trapping the queen. So this would be really a pretty frisky position. White's up, or is down a full piece, but with a lot of threats, and Black's king is not particularly safe. So knight to a3 is really not a move in the King's Gambit spirit, to be sure. Okay, bishop g5. Here, bishop takes a6 is probably a mistake. Black should have just taken on f4 and played g3, and White's in trouble. So instead, b takes a6, and now knight to c4 was a good move. And again, this is a very unclear position. In the game, Black castled, but if he had played bishop takes f4, we can see what would happen. Bishop f4, and now g3. Most of the time, this has proven to be a very effective strategy. But here, after queen f3, queen h2 check, king f1, it's very tricky. Let's look at one line. Bishop to g4, and now bishop takes g3. Queen h1 check, king f2. And here, if Black takes the rook on a1, he loses. Queen f6. All right, White is down 2 rooks for just 1 knight, but you can see that the Black king is clearly in tremendous trouble. If he castles here, kingside, then bishop to f4 is winning. So let's see, rook h7. Now bishop takes d6, threatening mate on e7. Knight to g8, and that's why Black plays rook h7 and not rook to g8, by the way. Queen g5, threatening queen takes g8. King d7. Knight a4, threatening knight c5 check, followed by queen takes g8 mate. So rook e8, and now d5. And you can just see the lines are opening up in a way that's just too much for black to handle. c5, knight c5, king c8, and now a nice way to win would be queen to d2, followed by queen to b4, and then queen to b7 or queen to b8. Well, queen to b8 really is the move there. So queen takes a1 would be a mistake here. He should just trade, but even this position is pretty unclear. I mean, white's got a knight and a pawn and very active pieces for the rook. You can see that black has only isolated pawns, so white's a little bit better here. All right, in the game, black castled kingside, and here I think white should play queen to d3. Developing, but also maybe keeping an eye on the g3 square in some cases. So knight takes d6 happened, bishop f4, and here probably g3 should be played. So again, we can have a similar line, but this time it's not as good for white as the other one. So this one may be approximately equal in a crazy position like this. All right, in the game, black played king h7, which was bad because queen to d3, and now e5 is on the cards. And at the very least, I mean, black's king is exposed there. So even if e5 is not a big deal now, there's always that possibility. Okay, so black played f5 to take away that possibility. But here, d5 would have been very strong. Again, ripping open lines. I mean, that's what you got to do. So both sides are really playing kind of slowly in some key moments. I mean, black should have been looking to play g3 at every opportunity. I mean, trying to find whatever possible way to make this work. And white, for his part, needs to blast open lines in the center. So both sides, I think, are making inaccuracies on that account. So bishop to g3. This would be a good move if white could maintain control over the g3 square, but he can't. So here black should play queen g5 and then play h4 or f4. Instead he played queen f6, which helps white, e5. Okay, now he goes to g5, which is where he should be. And now probably rook to f1 is best. So that way on h4, at least there's bishop to f4, and white is trying to keep everything kind of solid, keeping it all together. Instead he played knight takes c8, getting rid of this very good knight for a bishop that, at least at the moment, is not really an important piece. Rook a takes c8, and again, rook f1 to prepare bishop to f4 really was a must. Instead he played queen a6, which was the point of this knight takes c8 move, but who cares? I mean, the pawn on a6 just has nothing to do with what's going on. So, you know, in a position like this, where your king is in danger, where all kinds of complicated things are going on, taking a pawn on the complete opposite side of the board when your opponent has all of this attacking force mustered against your king, I mean, this is insane. I mean, who cares about the a6 pawn? I mean, you got to play rook f1 so you can play bishop to f4. I mean, let's look at this by comparison. So here, this keeps this pawn here, which means that this rook stays out of the game. This knight is bottled up for the moment. Okay, we're keeping the queen from making further progress into the position. So all of this, you know, black still has play, but white is in far better shape. And then maybe play something like d5, let's say queen h5, d5. Now these pawns are both dangerous, and if black were to take, then knight takes d5 maybe, threatening knight to f6 check. Maybe you can play e6 and queen d4 and try to use this diagonal. So this makes much more sense. I mean, the a6 pawn is just, it's left field. Who cares? I mean, white is not going to win, at least in any kind of normal course of events, by taking on a7 and then promoting his a pawn. All right, so black plays h4, bishop f2, another poor move. Why give another free move? I mean, black wants to play g3. So this is just crazy. Don't defend like this. Don't let your opponent make these attacking moves with tempo. It's not the way to do it. Okay, queen to b7 check, and here another strange move. This time by black, king to g6. Just go to h8 or g8. I mean, there's no danger at the moment. I mean, it's going to take white several moves to play d5, bishop d4, e6 check, and even then it's not mate because the queen on g5 stops queen to g7. So get your king out of the way. This way, you're not on the g file. Your king's not going to be checked anytime soon. Much more tidy way of handling the position. All right, so king g6, bishop e1, and here h3 would have been a strong move. Okay, queen e3 check is not terrible, but we want to make moves that are straight to the point. And here, okay, queen d4. I mean, this is like queen takes a6. So you're allowing maybe rook to d1, and then white gets to activate some forces. The d pawn has nothing to do with what's going on. It may, in some cases, even help white to, well, it clears the d file. It might clear the a1, h8 diagonal for the bishop. This is awful. So just play h3. h3. Just crash through. Or another good move would be f4 with the idea of playing for f3. So you get all of your pieces into the act here. So queen takes d4 is just very strange. e6. Okay, and now from here, though, black plays, I think, entirely well. Knight to g4, rook d1. Okay, here I would prefer queen to e3 or queen to f4 to queen e5, but queen e5 doesn't really hurt anything either. Queen e7, knight f2 check, and now it's just a win. Takes, rook f1, queen e1, and it's game over. So white kicked on for a few more moves, but there's just no hope here. Yeah, king f1 would make more sense, but white is still dead lost here. King g1, rook to g8, followed by a king discovery somewhere. I guess white could try queen to h4, but then rook h8, followed by rook h1 mate. And if king to e1, then rook c to e8, and then something like this is convincing. Well, instead of that, white played king h1 and just got mated. So definitely some big improvements for both sides. But the key thing, really, I mean, is to take seriously the attack. I mean, in a position where both sides are trying to attack, I mean, you've got imbalances all over the place, both sides have weak kings, you've got to do things that are either directly concerned with defending your own king or prosecuting your own attack. And anything that doesn't have to do with that, don't waste time on it. I mean, it's very, very rare that, again, moves like queen a6 will ever be even mildly relevant. All right, enough on that. The point has been made. Okay, finally, someone, I forget who it was, I think this might have been Chris Falter again, asked about the Dragendorf for white. So the Dragendorf is this dragon-Najdorf hybrid that goes like this. And then either bishop g7 first and then a6, or a6 right away. I think a6 right away is considered more accurate because sometimes white will play queen d2 and bishop to h6, and there's no reason for black to waste its tempo on bishop to g7 in case that plan occurs. Alright, so what should white do against this? Well, I mean, it's a major opening. I mean, there has been a book written on it a couple of years ago, I think it's Simon Williams who wrote it with Everyman. So you could check that out if you're really interested. I'll just give some very general pointers here. Okay, so one is that, first of all, you don't have to go for this kind of Yugoslav attack style setup with f3, queen d2, and so on, cast the queen side. But you can play in a quiet way, and it's not bad. Bishop b2, bishop g7, say a4, knight c6, and then castle king side. So a position like this is, you know, I mean, it's not, let's say, the acid test for black, but it's not bad either. And if you like this kind of quiet approach, by all means play it. I mean, white's not worse. White can still fight for an edge, and you avoid the really hair-raising stuff. Now, if you like the hair-raising stuff, then by all means go into it. So let's take a look at how that goes. So f3, and now there's a choice for black. So black can either go for the accelerated Dragendorf with b5, again delaying bishop to g7 to see what plan white chooses, or playing bishop to g7 and just getting on with it. All right, on the accelerated version, I don't think this is so great. And against this, white should, I think, well, white can play the queen to d2 plan, absolutely, but I think a4 is pretty decent. Anand himself played in this way about a decade ago against Topalov. And in general, when black has played b5 and white hasn't castled queenside yet, a4 is a normal reaction. So b4, knight to d5, takes, and okay, I mean, black can play bishop to b7 here, or bishop to g7 is also a known move. Okay, and then white plays either queen to d2 or bishop to c4 and so on. Or going back here, bishop to b7, again bishop c4, let's say bishop to b3. And I think this is how the Anand Topalov game went. At any rate, the play here is a bit different. White still often does castle queenside, and in fact he's pretty safe because of the pawns on the black pawn on b4 and the white pawn on a4 make it extremely difficult now for black to open any files on the queenside. I mean, other than the c file, which is already open from move 4. But other than that, it all stays closed. The pawn on d5 is a kind of a thorn in black's flesh. It controls some nice squares. Sometimes white can play knight to c6 using that pawn. Also, with the half-open e file, white can put pressure along the e file. And so I like this position for white. I don't know if I would say that white is officially better here, but it's a reasonably comfortable position to play. At least I found that to be the case. And certainly at amateur level, I think it's easier for white to play than for black. All right, so let's stick to the regular Dragendorf here with bishop to g7. Now, here white has another choice. You can play either queen to d2 and get on with directly kingside related moves, or he can play bishop to c4 and wait around a little bit before he bothers with queen to d2. So let's take a look at both. So if bishop to c4, knight b to d7, here probably queen to d2 is as good as anything else. Okay, now b5, bishop b3, bishop to b7. Yeah, note that if castles here, then knight to c6 is awkward. So bishop b7 takes care of that. Castles queenside, knight c5, bishop h6, takes, e5, knight back to e2, takes and takes. And this is perhaps the absolute main line of the Dragendorf. This is the starting position of that. And just to give a couple of lines from here. b4 is sometimes played. Against this, I think white should put the knight on a4. Double rooks on the d file, or at least threaten to. So if black plays d5 here before white can kind of cool that off, then queen to g5, queen to e7, takes, knight c5, and rook to e1. And I think white has an edge here. It's nothing big, but it's his coordination's a little bit better than black's. I mean, the king on e7 is slightly exposed, and the black rooks aren't really where they want to be yet. So I kind of like white here a little bit. Instead of b4 back in this position, black can also play queen to e7, preparing castle and queenside. And from here, white prepares ideas like knight to c1, with the idea of bringing the knight to d3 or sometimes a2, and then going to d5. Also, queen to e3 is often on the agenda to swing the queen over to the queen side somewhere and drum up some play in that way. All right, so that was bishop c4, knight b to d2, knight b to d7, queen d2, and so on. Okay, also possible is queen to d2. So we're not going to rush to bring out the bishop. Knight b to d7, g4, threatening g5, b5. And now here, one interesting line is knight c6, queen c7, knight takes e7. So this is not unknown. It's a line that's been played quite a few times, but it's interesting. So the tactical point is that after g5, the knight can't move because of knight to d5 check. So bishop b7, takes, and now either bishop to g5 or castles with interesting play. I mean, you just have to kind of work things out further from here, but it's certainly playable for white. White's not worse, and it's an entertaining position. So have a look at all of this, and hopefully this is at least enough to get you started. But I wouldn't say that there's some refutation of the Dragendorf. If there is, I don't know it. So I'm not sure that I like it that much, and I think that b5, a4 is a strong way of meeting the accelerated version. But the main line of it's tough to play. I mean, I think you really have to develop a new set of instincts if you play this with black, even if you played the regular dragon beforehand. But once you do that, it's playable. So I'm not sure if it's completely trustworthy, but I don't think white gets a clear advantage by force either. Okay, so this was a long video, but there was enough material worth discussing that it just took that long. All right, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.